Hi everybody, thanks so much for joining us here today. My name is Ian Milligan. I'm one of the co-principal investigators of the Archives Unleashed project, and I'll be presenting BUILD, the Archives Research Compute Hub from idea to platform. While I'm the one presenting here today, I want to draw attention to my collaborators on the project, and that is Jefferson Bailey, a co-investigator from the Internet Archive, Nick Ruest, a co-investigator from York University, as well as Helga Holzman from the Internet Archive, Samantha Fritz from the University of Waterloo, and Cody Willis from the Internet Archive. So while I'm presenting, this really is a group effort. Now, why have we developed Arch? Well, I believe that the web is foundational to our understanding of contemporary social history. The web reflects our society, yet it remains an untapped resource for research. The web has been archived since the mid-1990s. The Internet Archive started in 1996 and has now led to this explosion of archival material. 100 petabytes plus at the Internet Archive, and probably about that same at national libraries around the world. And all of this information provides a new context for doing research in the form of web archives. But while we have all of this data, we have a challenge. That currently, in our estimation, the available analytics tools and the community infrastructure just aren't there to let researchers work with web data at scale. When they want to work with material, they might find themselves opening up a command line, or using a bulky interface, or diving deep into the sort of depths of GitHub. And all of that, we believe, present extremely high barriers for conducting research with web archives at scale. And so this is where the Archives Unleashed project has come in. So our Archives Unleashed project started in 2017 with funding from the Andrew W. Mellon Foundation, and our project recognized the critical role of web archives for scholars studying the 1990s and onwards. To that end, we developed the Archives Unleashed Cloud. You can see a picture of it at right, and that was an interface to sync Archive.it collections, to analyze them, to generate scholarly derivatives, and then work with them. You could go in, sync with your Archive.it collections, and you could download a file to work in Gephi. You could download all the text of the web pages, the domains, etc. And it was a standalone system. You'd go to cloud.archivesunleashed.org. There's limitations for a standalone system that we'll talk about. But to us, it was really a proof of concept that demonstrated how you could use your web archive, you could use your web browser to work with web archives. That you could use your web browser and run Archives Unleashed toolkit jobs, which are this sort of super complicated, command line-y focused Apache Spark-based system, and that this was something that was possible. And so as part of this, we also refined what lay underneath the Archives Unleashed Cloud, or the Archives Unleashed toolkit. I won't go into detail in our short time together today on what that is, but the Archives Unleashed toolkit is an Apache Spark library for working with work files and analyzing them. And we develop user documentation. You can check it out yourself if you just Google Archives Unleashed toolkit documentation. And we have dozens of pre-built scripts where you can take your work files, you can explore them, and you can turn them into text files or image files, etc. to work with. Now, at the end of that project, we realized we wanted to find a way to make that platform we developed sustainable. And so for the second phase of the Archive Unleashed project, also funded by the Andrew W. Mellon Foundation, we have two main project priorities. The first is to merge the Archives Unleashed project with the Internet Archive's Archive.it platform to create an end-to-end solution to collect and study web archives. And that's basically taking the cloud and moving the cloud into the Internet Archive so that's all together. Data flows really, really effortlessly. And we call that the Arch, or the Archives Research Compute Hub. Simultaneously, we also want to foster and support a research community of practice by offering opportunities to engage with web archive research. And to that end, we funded 5 research teams to use Arch, to use other data sets, and to begin thinking about how they can take web archives and turn it into cutting-edge published scholarship. And Valerie Schaefer's team, which will be presenting later in this panel, is one of our, we're really proud to have supported their work through the cohort program. So let's dive into the different elements of our project. And here I want to introduce the Arch platform. So you can see Arch at right. We're analyzing an archivic collection about the life of Aaron Swartz. And our goal with Arch was to develop a scalable analysis platform within the Archivit environment. That the same user who's using Archivit to create their collections, to explore crawls, can click on the Arch tab and then begin to dive into the data and make it useful for research within their web archival collections. Now, as you can see from the screenshots, and I'll show you a quick demo shortly, the goal is to make it look, familiar to current Archivit subscribers. That it addresses the first steps in analysis where you might be looking for a basic overview of the collection. You might want to have text to work with a text analysis program. You might want network diagrams, etc. And to that end, we let users generate and download over a dozen different web archive datasets. Each of those datasets has in-browser visualizations. We provide data previews so you can get a sense of what the data you're about to download looks like. And crucially, because unlike the previous platform, which is standalone, was actually sitting in a server farm in Victoria, British Columbia, Arch is located in the Internet Archive Data Center. And so when you have, a multi-terabyte collection that you want to analyze, it's all in the same computing environment, and we really dramatically reduced the overhead necessary of transferring files and storing them somewhere else to be processed. So here's the landing page for Arch, the Archive Research Compute Hub. Now here we actually support different user account types. There can be user account types that are just for Arch, but of course if you have an Archivit account, you can log in as well. So here I am, I'm going to log in with my Archivit account, and you'll see I'm brought to the landing page of the Arch interface. Now what you see here is a mixture of my own collections, things that we've collected using our Archivit account, as well as collections that have been added to our Archivit account. So from other institutions or the Internet Archive itself that we wanted to work with. But for this demonstration, I'll open up one of a collection that we've been collecting, which is the Ontario COVID-19 page. So we click on that collection, we're brought to the landing page, and we can see a bit of an overview of what we have. So this is a 2-seed collection. It was last crawled on May 5th, 2022. I'm recording the day after, so this is a daily crawl collection. 2.4 gigabytes, so it's pretty small, and it's public. Now if I scroll down, I can see the jobs that we've completed. And this is actually really important because we've had this collection for a while, and so it's important to note when you've run those jobs. So here I see I ran domain frequency. Last time I ran that was actually November of 2021. Of course, there was a crawl just yesterday, May 5th, 2022. And that's an indication that if I want to have up-to-date data, I'm going to need to rerun those jobs. Now, the heart of the interface is generate datasets. And here you'll see the 14 different datasets that we allow people to generate. Under each of those jobs, there's two options. One is to work with the example dataset, which only works on 100 records, and the full dataset. And our goal there, it isn't random sampling, it's rather just to give people a file so you can see, is this the kind of file I want to work with? Is this data going to answer my research question? So here you'll see an example of a dataset we haven't run yet. These are WAT files. If you've generated the dataset, it's in green. If it hasn't been generated, it's in blue. I'm going to click on that, and we're going to begin to generate it. If I hadn't been running other jobs, the server is a little bit busy right now because I've run a few different jobs, it would say running. It is not running yet because it is queued. And so we'll find out. It'll send us an email once it's complete. And we can actually go over to the job summary, and we can see that we are number 1 in the queue. So there's one job running ahead of us. When that's completed, it will run and then let us know. So the first set of data sets is collection. We have network, we have text, and we have information on file formats. And what I'm going to do is just show you an example of one of these. This is the domain graph. Everybody here knows that I love networks. Let's take a look at the network for this collection. We click on View Dataset, and it loads up. And what you'll see at the top is we actually have a in-browser visualization, so you can get a sense of that domain network. We see here toronto.ca, City of Toronto's website, the Toronto Transit Commission, Toronto Public Library, Toronto Police. We're getting a sense of the sort of rough contours of what's in this collection, which is, of course, it's Ontario, and then we look at this and we see it actually is Toronto-centric, which is understandable given Toronto is the capital and largest city of Ontario. There's the data set. I could download that data set there, 8,450 lines. There's the preview of what we see in here, source and target for that thing. Now, a bit of our conversation... Now, a bit of what we also wanted to talk about in our presentation is the process by which we built the Arch interface. How did we build a platform designed for scalable analysis? Well, it was a multi-step process. First of all, we identified existing Archives Unleashed, the toolkit in the cloud. And then we looked at Archive-It services, what they called Archive-It Research Services, or ARS. And we found the areas of overlaps and the areas of differences. Where could Internet Archive use things we'd created? Where could we use things that Internet Archive had already created? Then we went to pen and paper. Then we went to an interactive prototype, and we started imagining as a team what this would look like. And then we began to iterate, both internally as our sort of collaborative interdisciplinary team at Archives Unleashed and the Internet Archive, but also reaching out to people who had used our services before, our advisory board, our partners, showing them storyboards, telling them, work with this. What would make an intuitive or friendly workflow? Then throughout, we've done user experience testing. You'll see the 5 rounds that we put on this screen behind you. And our goal here was to really work with our end users, to get our project staff, our developers, to work with end users and find out what works and what doesn't work. And our goal of all of that was to understand research behaviors and the user journey while addressing and assessing what works well, what challenges they met, and any needs that weren't being met. And so we've carried out these rounds. We started with the concept design interviews in January of 2021, with internal UX testing with Archive-It web archivists and engineers in May of 2021. In the late summer, early fall of 2021, we then reached out to do external testing. Previous people who we'd interviewed, our advisory board, other power users. Then in January, we expanded it even more. We called this the sort of stress test. We invited over 100 people who had used the Archive Unleashed Cloud, Archive-It partners who the Archive-It team knew were engaged in sort of computational research. And then, of course, our final round has been working with the 5 research teams from the cohort program. We've also done a lot of back-end connection and integration. We can talk about this in the Q&A if people are interested. And that has involved not just front-end development, but thinking about the back-end process of taking works, ingesting them, analyzing them, and producing usable derivatives. There's been quite a bit of work in integrating, a research project into a production environment. It's a whole new world for me as a historian, to think about something that needs to be used at such a scale as you might get in the Internet Archive. And then a host of technical choices. So with, the Scalatra app that we're developing in, Apache Spark, loading data into HDFS, Sparkling, which is the sort of Internet Archive approach to ingesting works, which we placed at our old Java-based library, and of course, how the Archives Unleashed toolkit can adapt and continue to work in this environment. We do have plans going forward as we always strive for continual improvement. Right now, as I speak, Arch is in beta. We still have pilot users working on it. We're doing lots of monitoring. And in our final year, we're going to develop it a bit more. We're going to let people filter their collections so that if you have a large Archive-It collection, but you just want to run data on a few domains or on 1 year of a multi-year project, you can do so. And we're still having conversations as a team about how we will provide thoughtful access and use for those who aren't Archive-It subscribers, because we really are dedicated to making this accessible, not just to subscribers, but to the Web Archive research community. So I'll conclude with a few quick lessons learned. Well, first lesson, we've learned that if you build it, they won't come. You need to actively work to create an environment where users feel comfortable, and that underpins all of our work with user experience and beyond. Lesson 2, you need to work to meet your users. This doesn't necessarily mean that you will make all of them happy, but it does mean that you need to listen and be responsive through UX testing and outreach. And finally, and this hopefully resonates with everybody in the room, the third lesson is to be ready for the unexpected. If there's something that's 1 in a million, if you're working with works, you're going to run into it dozens of times. So be ready for error handling and continual improvement. So at this point, I'll quickly acknowledge our partnership with the Internet Archive's Archive It service, note our generous funding from the Andrew W. Mellon Foundation, which makes this project possible, and highlight other financial and in-kind support from granting agencies and universities here in Canada and in the United States. So with this, I will thank you very much and look forward to our question discussion. If offline you're curious, we're always happy to connect on Twitter. You can email us at archivesunleashed@gmail.com or visit our project website at archivesunleashed.org. And